I'm the Hero. Today I would like to start a series focused on optimizing different champions within League of Legends. As the game changes, people are pretty slow to adapt or at least try to look for new things, but people aren't looking for things on their own. So I thought I would take different champions and really boil down what they want to do and then try to find what works best for them. And there are a lot of different cases where champions have different kinds of builds, different kinds of things they can go for. I want to try to cover as much of all of this isn't coming from a high elo challenger grandmaster player. This is coming from someone who just thinks about the game a lot and likes to innovate. I've done my fair share of coming up with different builds and stuff that maybe popped up here and there. So I'd like to actually have a bit more of a mark on what I push forward. So today I'm going to start with a champion that I'm very fond of and have a lot of experience testing and a lot of experience messing around with. So I already have an idea as to what I want to do, what I want to look for, and what I want to do. Uh, that champion is Senna. Senna is very annoying champion that can be flexed in the support or the AD carry position. Balanced nightmare and theory crafting nightmare. People want to try everything and then they don't try anything, and then everyone's building the same thing that for no reason, even though she's a very flexible champion. The correct build actually varies very greatly between different games. So I'm gonna try to cover almost everything that you can do, and then hopefully people can learn a bit about what your options are. I think that's the best way to put it. Putting forth all the options you can do on this champion. So I'm gonna go through runes and then items and then team comps, because at least for Senna that's very important, and a lot of her lane partners in jungle mid matchup matters a lot. I'm gonna start with, actually I'm just gonna go down. I'm just gonna finish the whole tree. So I'm using the fandom wiki. It has everything really nice put together. I can just hover everything, people can see whatever. It's just I think it's very compact and very easy. At least this page for runes, and then for items, I don't know. We'll see if, because items I know will take a long time. I might record it and then speed up the footage, and then I'll talk over it. That might be the best way to do it. Yeah. Okay, so in the precision tree, you have your keystones. There's fleet of footwork, which is what most people go. It gives you a bit of a. The heal is pretty shit, but it gives you move speed, which is something Senna needs, considering her attack speed's low and she wants to stack. So having the move speed will give you a better chance to stack. If you start with your Q, you can follow with an auto. If you start with an auto, you can follow. It's better for starting with auto and then leading into Q. If you start with Q, you probably are going to get an auto off because of the slow anyways. But in some cases, you can also, it might help you get another auto after in your auto Q auto combo. But yeah, that's all. It's all that the keystone really does. It's really all about the move speed, and a lot of the time there's just better options, especially in certain playstyles that don't particularly benefit from that as much. The playstyle I would say this benefits the most would be a bursty lethality build, which is what a lot of people go to, but also don't necessarily play around properly. So this would be like a hit and run kind of keystone, which is not always how you want to play Senna. You can do a lot of different things. For For instance, on hit Sennas can play for press the attack. It's pretty easy to stack. You can just do it with an auto Q auto. Your Q applies press the attack as well as any on hits, which is very important and kind of the main factor in why on hit Senna is actually very good. The okay. So taking a look at the keystone, you get a nice bit of burst, and then you get a bonus adaptive damage for 6 seconds, and then the cooldown's also 6 seconds. So the moment that you don't get bonus damage on the champion, is when you can start applying it to a different champion, and that damage is universal. It's to your they just take bonus damage from your teammates, from neutral monsters, from everything, which is nice. It's a very underrated thing about this keystone. Yeah, and then also, it's adaptive. Doesn't really matter for Senna, but like, there's some like maybe like Kale, or something that's like AP. That's like something you would think about, but I mean, this is a very stable rune for when you can actually get into range. So like, let's just talk about when you want to take this. Fleet, you take in disadvantageous matchups. So mage matchups mostly, where you're kind of playing around max range. In some cases, in some engage matchups as well, if you're not feeling particularly safe. If they can't, like, if you can position well, like if they're like a hooker, you probably don't need it. But like if it's something like a Leona that can hit you through minions, then you might want to be a little more quick with your trades. But something like an Enchanter matchup, which Senna naturally favors, she can smash way harder with press the attack. So that's another thing to consider. And then people talk about lethal tempo as a viable option, but in reality, there isn't really a case where it's better than anything else. Like, if you want to stack lethal tempo, you gotta be on the outside of a fight, and then like hitting like a tank. And then when you stack it, it'll help you. The range is to help you hit champions that you aren't stacking with it with. So you probably aren't going to be using it really. Like if you're stacking it, you're not using it when it actually matters, if that makes sense. Her just doesn't really work on like she stacks it way too slowly, and the bonus isn't particularly worth it. So this just isn't worth taking. Overheal is a pretty underrated rune. It's not like insane on Senna, but like in general, because people forget that ally healing also works for this. A lot of people think that this is just lifesteal, which isn't really the case. I mean, like a lot of ADCs would take it after they would heal after they lifesteal up, but like if you have an Enchanter, Senna likes a lot of like Seraphine lanes and stuff like that. That also gives you a shield, and Senna's very squishy on most of her builds. So having a little bit of like extra protection can be very nice. Moving down, Triumph. Triumph is like everyone kind of understands what it is. It's a little sustain after you get a kill, a little gold. It's not too valuable in Senna, because if you're getting hit, you're probably close to death, and it's like Triumph doesn't really benefit like champions that are playing at max range. And like if you're getting hit, you're probably closer to dying than you are to like resetting. Sen isn't really a reset champion. I mean the gold is nice though, but I mean I don't see it being a particularly valuable option, at least in this slot. Presence of Mind is just really strong. I mean, it's a pretty staple for most marksman champions, just because the mana, not having to worry about running out of mana is very nice, especially on the Senna, which, I mean, you're gonna be casting a lot out of combat, so your mana might be like maybe half before a fight starts. So being able to not worry as much when you're like when combat actually starts, having a bit of regen helps. In lane, you can just auto every once in a while, and then you'll have more regen. It's generally it's the most reliable option in this tree. I would say overheal situationally good, but presence of mind is what you should default to like 90% of the time. Slot 2, you have your legend runes, and then I think the only real choice here is alacrity. Like, people like to clown on the idea of building attack speed on Senna, but her ratio is 0.3, meaning she gains half the benefit that other champions do from attack speed. But what attack speed also does is decrease her wind up time for auto. Like, her auto is so shit without attack speed. So like just for that alone, having attack speed is like nice. Uh, on the contrary, tenacity isn't particularly valuable, based on the fact that if you're getting CC'd, you're probably going to die anyway. Tenacity only has value in like tankier builds, which isn't really which aren't strong anymore. I would say they're a bit past their prime. A lot of the items that you'd build are pretty nerfed. Sunderer is gutted. Black Cleaver is still bugged. Locket is nerfed. Redemption is nerfed. Like, all these items, like, that like you traditionally build on like a more like, regardless, it's just not there isn't enough value on Senna nowadays. Her best, like the champion shines strongest in builds where you don't need the tenacity anyway. Bloodline isn't that valuable. Like, it takes too long to stack, and then it's, I mean, I don't know. It just isn't as good as Alacrity, I'd say. The value isn't there. On slot 3, the only real option I'd say is cut down. Senna's base HP is so low that you can have it against most champions just by not doing anything. Like, I think like 70 or so percent of the roster will have the minimum damage on them, like just from existing. And then a lot of champions might build like little bits of health, so that like actually like increases. Like, if you like, mage items have health, like bruiser items, support items, like they have health. So like, having 5% damage on a champion 100% of the time, I think is more valuable than 8% 40% of the time. And then last stand isn't really valuable, because if you're below that HP threshold, you're probably gonna die, and you're not using the damage very much. But yeah, even if like 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 of the enemy champions have cut down, just the 5%, it's crazy value. And then if they have more health, if they have like a tank, which they, or a bruiser, they probably will, and that's even more damage 100% of the time. So I think, like, even late game, when you have enough damage and you want utility, like, the trade-off is fine. Like, you want the damage early game to help get to the point where you don't need any more damage. So I think cut down is just always what you take if you're taking precision. Or, yeah. Oh, if you take precision secondary, it kind of varies. I mean, it's usually going to be some combination of presence of mind, alacrity, cut down. I'm not too crazy about precision secondary, just because like a lot of the other what are they called? I mean, pages, whatever. I don't fucking know. I mean, I guess runes, whatever. They have like a lot more niche stuff that like would probably bring more benefit. But I mean, those would be, it'd be 2 of the 3, probably. Maybe like a specific overheal comp. I mean, overheal, like Bloodline, is a thing on a lot of champions. Or it was a thing. It's not really a thing anymore, and nor is it one that you do on Senna. Okay, Domination. Domination is weird, because like, it's burst, but there isn't like the options aren't particularly good for that. Electrocute, I think, is just a worse version of press the attack, just because you can auto Q auto for that. I mean, you can do the same thing for electrocute, but it's just a worse version of that. It has like, it's a bit more damage, but it has like a cooldown, so you can't really do much with it. You can start if you start with W, it's okay, but I don't think it's worth it. Just like that little burst of damage doesn't really do much. Predator, I think, is too situational to be good. Senna doesn't roam well, so like, and she doesn't want to be walking, like, yeah, she doesn't really want to be walking around. And Predator just like also isn't like it just isn't that good. I mean, I think there could be some tech with Predator, but I don't think it's particularly valuable. It doesn't really benefit the playstyle that Senna wants to, or really any playstyle. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe in some kind of duo roaming with like a jungler strat, but even then, like I feel like there'd be better champions for that. Dark Harvest is probably the best keystone in this page. I think if you're going for like a really burst build, the options would be between Dark Harvest and Fleet. It depends on how much you're willing to commit. Dark Harvest is like the ultimate commit. Like you're going to one shot like the enemy support, the enemy AD carry. Whereas Fleet is like a bit of the safer side. But like the damage is there and it's pretty reliable. If you have like the burst damage, you can proc it pretty easily. Like a champion that isn't gonna have like a lot of armor, a lot of health, like these are the games where you'd want to have it. It's like it's a situational rune, but like it is very good in those situations. Hail of Blades was interesting because I was wondering how well it would impact your auto Q auto, and like, okay, so the way it works, it applies on your Q, but your Q also like starts up very quickly after your auto, so you only get the last the last part of the combo, like the auto Q, like the auto Q you get for free normally, and the last auto is what you get faster. But I don't think that's worth a keystone. That's like, it just doesn't really do much. And then the cooldown is like, it's like 12 seconds, which is that's really terrible, no? Yeah, it just doesn't feel valuable to me. Like no matter what you're trying to do with your combo, because like I'll talk about the benefits of the auto Q8. But yeah, Hail of Blades isn't particularly valuable, I would say. This tree is weird because cheap shots, like I don't think anything here is particularly good. Taste of Blood is really nerfed, so like it's all right. Like if you need more sustain, you can take it. Sudden Impact is interesting because it works with your shroud. Like I had to check, or does it even say here? I don't know if it says here. Or maybe if you click on the actual page, but like I can confirm it does work with your shroud. So like ally champions who also have sudden impact, if they're shrouded, they'll get the lethality. I mean that's nice because you can Q out of your shroud and you get a little bit more healing for that. A little bit more damage. So like this rune actually isn't that bad. Yeah. I think it's more reliable than cheap shot. Uh, like I think the damage is gonna be about the same, and like when you do it, like it just has a little bit more utility. Yeah, if it didn't work with their shroud, then this rune would be useless. So yeah, but it does. So that's why I would take for damage. And then here, it's kind of just like how you play. Zombie Ward is like the ideal combo would be Zombie Ward plus Umbral Glaive, but you don't need a Zombie Ward with Umbral Glaive. The item's just kind of broken on its own. I mean, with that playstyle, Zombie Ward has insane value because you will be destroying a lot of wards. But like, yeah, Ghost Borrow is like when you like it's the like the more consistent option. I say if Umbral Glaive wasn't a thing, Ghost Boros would be the most consistent option. But because Umbral Glaive exists, it's probably just Zombie Ward. Eyeball Collection is like your ARM rune or whatever. Like if you're not playing as a support, if you're playing like ADC Senna and you're not building a support item, then you could look at Eyeball Collection. But if you're playing ADC Senna, you probably aren't going Domination. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. The Hunter runes, it's kind of interesting. Treasure Hunter, it's just gold, but like if you're playing on a support economy, the gold is kind of a lot. You have less gold to work with, so this is very nice. And you can also stack it pretty easily because you have your global ult. So if anything happens top lane, mid lane, jungle where you're not out of reach, you can just ult and like you get your assists and you get your hunter stacks, and that can do a lot. Ingenious Hunter, I'd say was good with the Blockade Redemption meta. Maybe actually, I don't know. You probably wouldn't take this. You wouldn't take Domination. I feel like Senna just doesn't use items with cooldowns. Like I'm trying to think. Eclipse cooldown, maybe. Later the Ruined King cooldown. I'll talk about that item later. Gale Force, maybe. Duskblade. I don't think the haste would do anything with Duskblade. You're playing on the reset anyway, rather than like waiting for it to come off cooldown. Umbral Glaive, this barely like the cooldown's low now. Like I mean, it will buff Umbral Glaive, but I mean, the cooldown's short enough. It doesn't. You don't need this rune. I don't see this rune as particularly valuable, at least on Senna. Relentless Hunters, I think is a never bad rune. Out of like movement speed is just never bad. It's just whether other stuff has value. And here I'd say maybe like this will help you catch champion. So and if you're playing a burst playstyle, catching is very, I mean that's what you want. So like I mean I would see this as the most valuable option if you're going or if you're going Domination as your primary. Yeah, oh yeah. Also, I would never go Domination secondary. I played around with like taking stuff like Zombie War Treasure Hunter, taking Relentless, but like the value isn't really there. I feel like a lot of other runes have a lot greater value. Ultimate Hunter, I mean, it just you get your ult up faster, which is decent. In the higher haste spells, like around lethality, it could be nice. Not ulting off cooldown. So you're ulting just whenever the opportunity arises, but like that won't be like. A lot of the times you'll like fights will happen anyways without you having it up, and this probably won't change it. It's hard to say when this rune actually has a lot of its value because sometimes you're just gonna be like you have to know that your team's gonna be fighting a lot, which is kind of hard to know beforehand. So I mean it's not, and like the benefit is like not insane. It's also like it's very easy to dodge also, so like a lot of the game, like 95% of Senna's gameplay isn't based on her ult, so it's not really that important to take. Yeah. Sorcery. Sorcery is interesting. Airy is kind of broken. You auto, you proc Airy, you Q proc air. Like anytime you're gonna do anything, you can proc airy. You shroud someone, they get the airy shield. Like it's just very nice. It's a never bad rune. It does like the opportunity cost is like comparing it to the move speed, which if you don't need, like either you like how do I say? There are matchups where you don't need the move speed, so you can take airy very safely and have like guaranteed value. Comet's weird because like if you hit your abilities, I'm pretty sure Comet's guaranteed. I'm pretty sure your Q slow. I don't know about W maybe. No, not with the time it takes. But like you can proc it consistently with Q, and like it kind of lines up with like the cooldown, or I guess not early, but actually no, just not at all. But yeah, it's just a worse version of Fairy, at least on Senna, I would say. I mean, let's look at the damage. In really like bad mage matchups, I could see this like being slightly better than Airy. Like if you're playing out of the minion wave and like you have like I guess against something like a Xerath or like a Vel'Koz maybe. Against anything else, I don't think this rune is particularly good. Phase Rush is really weird because you can stack it very easily with an auto Q auto. And like the trade-off versus like Fleet helps you get your auto Q. So this is like if you can safely stay for like that 3-second window and then you can leave for free, or you can chase. But you can also trade pretty easily with your auto Q and not proc it, and you save the last auto for when you if you actually need to chase or if you need to like leave. So like if you have something like what's approach velocity to help you get to that point in the first place, then this rune can actually be pretty good. But like it's situational. I tested it very little, but I could imagine there being cases where this is actually pretty good. Nullifying Orb is, I mean, it is what it is. I feel like this rune is too weak. Like it just doesn't shield enough. Like, I feel like Riot would have to either lower the cooldown or buff the shield. I would prefer lowering the cooldown and keeping the shield small, just so it'd be a little different from something like X-Drinker, Maw of Malmortius. But like, yeah, if the enemy team's all AP, then maybe this is worth it. But like, probably not. That's like such a rare occurrence, so I wouldn't think about this too much. But just like, if you see it, Motherfucker isn't terrible. Man, I mean, this is another sustain. This is like an alternative choice to Presence of Mind. If you're going Sorcery instead of Precision, you take this. I think this is slightly worse than Presence of Mind, considering Mana Immune is worse than it was pre-durability update. So like even that little bonus isn't like that crazy, but even then, like, I mean, it's mana, and Senna needs mana some way or another. So it is probably the option you will take most of the time. Nemesis Cloak is kind of weird. I don't like it that much because like what it doesn't really, like, you're not playing around using your summoner spells for, I don't know, like, I feel like the value it gives isn't worth what you're like giving up, which is just mana. Like, okay, so if you're taking Ghost, which I'll talk about, I mean, you already have move speed, so I guess more move speed could be okay. Heal, it could be okay. Exhaust, I don't know. It could be good. It would be good with barrier, Barrier lacks move speed and escape. Another thing though is that this could help you chase. So like it's not awful, but I don't think it's more valuable than mana most of the time. Like I'd say mana flow is like 85-90% of the time. This is like 5%, this is like 5%, or maybe less, like 3%. It doesn't add up to 100, but it doesn't matter. Okay. Transcendence. Interesting. I don't think it's that valuable in Senna. Like, a lot of Senna's abilities are like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Her Q she'll get up naturally just by autoing her W. Like, the only like I'd say like ability that would be nice to have often again would be her W. You like having the ability to like maybe get a second route and like lock down a second target from escaping or from killing you. But like, I don't know, it's just not that insane. Celerity is very nice. I think move speed just feels really nice. Like you get one bonus move speed, which isn't a lot, but it adds up, and then move speed bonuses, like which include your passive, your shroud, and then from items, other runes, like it kind of adds up. Allies too, like, and move speed is a very important stat, which is why it feels nice. Like with how slow Senna autos, like a lot of builds revolve around having the move speed or the attack speed or both to make up for that. Because otherwise, you don't want to be sitting still, autoing a target, being basically rooted, and then not being able to like move afterwards. That you can't run away, can't run forward. So this helps, not that much, but it helps a bit, and it's like a never bad rune, I'd say. Absolute focus, I mean, it's okay. You want to play around being around 70% HP anyways. So like you'll have it active for most of the time. This is good early game, I would say. But like it kind of falls off, and like it's all right. I think this is matchup dependent on this to whether, like, if you're being poked out, you can. Okay. This is a very matchup dependent rune as to whether you can actually stay like healthy. I generally prefer Celerity. For me, it feels nicer, but I mean, like if you can guarantee like the value, if you can like, it's definitely not bad. Scorch, on Senna's not that good. On other champions, I mean, it got buffed and it actually feels like okay now, but it's just not that good on Senna. Water walking is interesting because like Senna likes move speed, but she doesn't like roaming alone. So if you have like an aggressive jungler, then water walking is actually pretty valuable. You can walk around with them. But if you're playing weak side, or if you're playing with a weak early game jungler, you can't walk safely around, then you don't want to take this. So it's kind of hard to know that your jungler is placed out early unless you're pre-made. But if you see like a good matchup, you can at least hope. Yeah. Gathering Storm is what it is. You can be a little more greedy with how you itemize, or I guess you can build more defensively if you have Gathering Storm, just because you'll have like a little bit of damage for free anyways. Like, and also if like the game's going bad, you have like it's just a fallback, which like if you don't need like the other, if you have Sorcery primary, I think it's more valuable than the other two anyways. So I think you just take it. It's not like insane. Senna will scale insanely anyways, but I mean it's not bad at all. And like I said, you can afford to build more defensively, getting the AD from like this. Like if you really need like something to survive, I feel like that would be more important than having only damage. But this will, Resolve. Resolve is kind of weird because like the key, like everything is like nerfed post their ability update, and I'll explain why. Grasp is super nerfed. Like this rune is gutted, and all the items that, like every playstyle that was good with Grasp is nerfed. So like I don't see, Grasp is no longer like the Jack of all trades rune. Its healing and damage are both really low, and then the health it gives is like I mean, okay, that doesn't change, but it just feels worse because it's less needed because you have that health for free. Like durability update is basically what Grasp would have given you, and that difference doesn't really change much. But yeah, this rune isn't that good anymore. I used to love this rune, but like it's just not the same. Aftershock, she only applies it with her W, and it's just too situational. I don't think you'd ever use this. Guardian is okay, but I feel like there are better ways to deal with like getting harassed. I don't know. I don't see Resolve Primary as good at all. Like this would probably be the best option, but the cooldown is really high, and then like getting constantly bombarded by like long range, assuming that's when you take this, it just isn't really valuable. The minor runes though are like kind of nice. Demolish is if you have a pushing ADC, Demolish is good. If you don't, then you don't take this. Senna's push is very bad, so like, and that's just how it is. Fawn of Life, pretty good. You don't have a lot of health, so like you're not laying a lot, but like you brought your pocket with your Q, your W, so like, I mean it's just free health, and like you take like, yeah. Shield Bash is an interesting rune. I don't think it's that good on Senna. I think it's underrated in some aspects. I might talk about this with a different champion probably, but like, yeah, on Senna it's not that good. But the rune isn't even that good either. It's just slightly underrated. Slightly. Conditioning is free survivability. If you have a free lane, you just take this and then you can laugh off some burst. Like, yeah. A lot of the runes kind of do the same. Like, these are all like kind of the same thing. So it's just when you take this. This is if you have a free lane. The value's gonna be good when it like late game or like mid game. Yeah, and like it's just about the 8 bonus armor MR. The other part doesn't really do anything if you're not building a lot of that. But yeah. Second wind is against poke, harass. Like, I mean that's what it is. That's all it is. In bad matchups, like if you pick Senna first and they counterpick with like a mage because they saw that online that it counters Senna, then you take this and it makes it feel a little less bad. Yeah. Bone plating is against engage. If you're not gonna have a free lane, like I'd say a free lane is an enchanter lane, and then this is mage lane, this is engage lane. This just helps you survive. And even like later on, if you have like this would protect you more than conditioning late game. But that's like assuming that you won't take. This is like if they don't have any poke, like late game, you take this for lane, and even though this is good late game, it's not like reliable because it can be procced by other bullshit. Overgrowth is interesting because you want to be around all minions and monsters anyways, so like you can probably stack it pretty well, but the amount of value it actually gives isn't that much. So like, it's just like, it really like depends on your playstyle, but like, yeah. Revitalize I think is just kind of a broken rune. Uh, so like this rune gives you 5% heal shield power, and then 10% outgoing and incoming healing shielding, which is okay. So this has a lot of levels. The two ratios or the two percentages are separate things. So like it's 5% to the heal shield stat, and then a separate 10% modifier incoming and outgoing. The two doesn't stack, so if you heal yourself, you don't get both bonuses, it's just one. But like, it's like just 10% on any healing on anything below 40% as a separate healing modifier. So like, something that's pretty broken is if there's any healing on your team, if you have an enchanter, if you have something, you both take it, and you basically get like 21%, because math, it's not 20%. Yeah. Unflinching is kind of the same thing as uh, tenacity. I mean, it is the same thing. If you're getting CC'd, you're probably dead. So, yeah. Inspiration, interesting, because Glacial used to be the Senna rune, but then they added it to her kit, and this Glacial isn't good on her anymore. Like, she only procs it on her W, which is not reliable at all. So I wouldn't take this. Spellbook is like interesting, but I don't think it's that good on Senna. Like, it just doesn't have more value than other stuff, because a lot of plays that you make around spellbook, stuff like smite or teleport, Senna isn't good at. So the rune isn't that good. First Strike was like what everyone went to when the rune was changed, or when Omnistone was changed, and like, yeah, this rune isn't bad at all. Like, people think it's bad now, which obviously this wasn't like a rune that you're supposed to take 70% of the time, but situationally this rune is good. If you can stack it for free, like, this rune is good. If you have an aggressive, like, if you're playing around the Senna, First Strike is actually a very strong rune. I wouldn't take this, like, oh, this is like a 10% rune maybe. But like, there are some lanes, like, if you can spot them, where you can just stack so much gold. And I mean, gold on Senna is more valuable than gold on almost any champion. Hex Splash, very situational. I don't see it being used on Senna. Footwear, interesting, because like everything it does is good, except the fact that you don't have the boots early. The one thing that most champions don't care about, like, that was like the initial trade-off, and like, oh, well, you don't have boots early. But like, on Senna, like, that actually matters. Like, you need boots early. Like, you cannot lane without boots. So that's the reason why you wouldn't take magical footwear. Perfect timing. I mean, if you're taking inspiration from this tree, you take this, but it's not like, it's all right. You just use the rune how you see fit. Your choose market is interesting. A lot of people don't understand how it works, and like, it's kind of hard to explain from that, but basically you just use this whenever you need to like hit like a crucial item. I might explain this another time when my voice isn't so sore. Like, it's okay. Dematerializer's okay at best. Not super important, so it's not super, like, I wouldn't take this. Biscuit delivery is, I mean, biscuits are super nerfed, but like, it's not terrible. If you're in a bad matchup, I mean, it's nice. It helps you stay in lane. Sentinel does not like leaving lane, so biscuits are actually pretty decent. Cosmic Insight is okay. It's okay. I mean, Summoner Spell Ace is nice for flash, or just being safe. Item Haste is okay. It's alright. Approach Velocity, very, very nice. People forget that you can It's not just your own CC, it's ally CC too. Uh, very, very nice rune. If you're taking inspiration, this is like the main reason you would take inspiration secondary. I wouldn't take inspiration primary. But secondary, approach velocity plus like biscuits, futures market, maybe perfect. Like that's a very nice combo. Time Atomic is too nerfed, I think. Like there are situations, but like it's just too nerfed, I think. At least I don't know if you have experience, maybe. Okay, shards. Just real quickly, I think attack speed always has more value than the other two. Here it just depends. If they have a lot of something, you just take double. Like taking double of something they have a lot of. If they have like 4 MR, 4 AD, 4 AP, you take that. Health is probably not that good because just your support, so you level slower. So it's usually just like attack speed, AD, plus probably armor. But like this bit changes based on the enemy comp. Okay, so yeah, the item testing portion is long as fuck, so I'm probably going to try to summarize what I found. I mean, I'll have like the footage sped up and everything, but like I went through a lot because I wanted to cover most of the different scenarios you'd be using stuff. So like I tried her auto, her Q, her auto Q, her auto Q auto, auto Q auto plus like a couple more autos, and then with like some abilities. So, and I did that for many different item combinations. I started with like different gold intervals, so like an assumed first back of like I think it was like around dark, so like around 1100 gold. So like whatever would be a similar value is what I would have tested, and I kept that throughout. So like the next point would be Umbral Glaive, which is 2300 gold, and then it would be like 3000 something ish. Whatever the difference would be components towards the next item if applicable. And yeah, comparing all the different values of each test for each item combination. So the mythic items I tested were Eclipse, Duskblade, Prowler's Claw, Kraken Slayer, Locket, which doesn't add damage, so you could do it without building the item. Shieldbow and Gale Force, which is like the same thing. Other like starts that I also considered Umbral Glaive Rush, Blade of the Ruined King Rush. What else? Guinsoo's Rush. So like there's like a lot of options, and then from there what would be the next best second item, third item, fourth item, and then so what did I actually find? Well, for starters, Blade of the Ruined King is kind of broken, even on Senna. It won in every single test at all points in time, except for the one auto test, or one Q test, and only to like one other item rush, which would be Duskblade. And that's because you get that proc. After the second auto though, or like the Q auto, or like after the second part, your blade also just matches, and then at the third auto, here's your Q. It just straight up won. What surprised me is how little damage Eclipse did. Like, Eclipse did about the same amount of damage as like Gale Force and Shieldbow, which is kind of strange, like upon initial like thought. But then like I looked at like what really changed between then and like, oh, the proc is basically worthless now. I mean, I thought that for a while, and I mean, I can see that here. But late game, the Eclipse actually becomes a very like one of the strongest options, just because of its mythic passive. Uh, Late game, it's the best between itself and Kraken Slayer. Kraken Slayer remains the best mythic for damage throughout. Uh, like even like first to sixth item, it is the highest damage always. The very rare exception would be Eclipse. In certain builds where you don't have any like other, if you're going pure damage, then Eclipse can do, but it does the same damage, but it also gives move speed, so I would say it's a little better. Early on, Duskblade is very much the strongest burst item, which makes sense. When opting to play a lethality playstyle, I highly recommend going Duskblade as your mythic item over Eclipse. Eclipse's main benefit, like nowadays, is the move speed you get on this proc. Everything, the shield is pretty bad. The damage isn't like the damage isn't bad, but it's worse than Duskblade. It's worse than Kraken Slayer. Also tested Sunderer and I tested AP. I mean, okay, the deal on AP is that you move really fast with your E, and that's about it. Sunderer is just too nerf. It just doesn't compete in damage anymore, and you're not really that tanky. If you're gonna go a tank item, I would say Locket. The tank mythics aren't that like. At least Locket has utility for your team. Tank. I'll also quickly address Moonstone. Moonstone can be nice. I mean, in terms of like damage check tests, you're just down an item, but like you also have the free healing. You can keep it up just by autoing. I mean the mythic is nice, but like I feel like Moonstone Senna is just an inferior version of Moonstone other enchanter support. So yeah, and like the damage, you if you commit to like lethality with Moonstone, I feel like I mean that's a lot more playable than just pure enchanter. I think pure enchanter Senna's terrible, but lethality plus Moonstone can work pretty decently if you're to have a pretty nice front line. But yeah, most items have a pretty stable like place where they're the best. Blade of the Ruin King is the best damage item at all points in the game, except for like very late game, or in cases where the enemy has a very low amount of health and a very high amount of armor. And then consistently slightly less than it, but still the second highest was Kraken Slayer. Once you get the once you get the proc, it always outdamages any lethality item. So the trade-off would be if you're pretty comfortable in getting the proc, you should go Kraken Slayer as your mythic. Early on, Guinsoo does a lot of damage, even like not with Kraken Slayer. It's just the on hit just feels really nice. Similarly, Muramana, it's the same thing except it contributes more to AD ratios, so your abilities do a bit more damage, and then its own thing applies on abilities. So early on, Mana Immune or Muramana is okay. Mana Immune is pretty bad, but like once it's upgraded around like 2. It'll usually upgrade at around like 2.5 items. And then it's no longer the best damage item since the durability update. A little bit of armor and health, put like other stuff above it, but it's still a good item. But I would take it in like lethality CDR builds. So like the main builds I would say that you would think about would be on hit, burst, utility burst, yeah, and that's it. So for like on hit, I would actually recommend going Blade of the Ruined King first, and then going Kraken Slayer. With that, you do have an insane amount of damage. Umbral Glaive is still an amazing rush item, and you can very easily pivot into any build. So I highly recommend going it first, at least on any support variants of Senna. Maybe not so much on ADC. If you're greeting, it might not be worth it on fasting, but on support, you should just always rush Umbral Glaive and then decide what you're gonna do later. For support, your options to pivot would either be a mythic, so Duskblade, Eclipse, which I'm not crazy about, or at least early on. It would be a transition item, like late game, but I mean people still do it. You can just pivot into on hit too with Kraken. You can pivot into on hit with Blade of the Ruined King as well. I feel like Umbral into Blade of the Ruined King is a pretty strong. It's like you have the early power spike of Umbral Glaive, and then you have a pathway into an insane late game. Another thing that people need to consider is the two utility items that Senna likes to build, and feel like we might be wondering, two, isn't it just Rapid Fire Cannon? Rapid Fire Cannon is very nice. It makes stacking souls easier, but it isn't always the best option. Rapid Fire Cannon's good when you need the range. If you're getting outranged, if you're not safe to harass, but if you're already safe to harass, there's better options, and that would be Hurricane. Hurricane does a lot. It applies basically every one of Senna's passives. So you can get stacks from anyone the bolts touch. So it too is a very good stacking item. If the enemy has a lot of short range, it's way better than Rapid Fire Cannon, but that's obviously not always going to be the case. But it makes a lot of things easier. You're probably never going to go both, but getting one of them as your second or third item is probably a good idea. And then late game, once you have a ton of stacks, you should always replace your Rapid Fire Cannon with Hurricane. Once you have the range, it's very easy to get the bolts. Hurricane, the way Hurricane works is, it scales with your range. Anything within a semicircle, 880 degrees in front of you, around where you're autoing, is susceptible to being hit by a bolt. So, if you walk very slightly past your max range and hit a target, you can easily hit multiple targets. That makes you get your Q faster. That makes you stack faster. That also makes you just do more damage. Very, very good. Guinsoo's versus IE, something that people like to talk about a lot. And even though it's been settled a while ago, I'll go over it again. Guinsoo's is just always better than IE before 100% crit and 300 AD. At that point, IE begins to outskill. In certain builds, Guinsoo's remains stronger for a little bit longer. If you have Hurricane, if you have a lot of other on hits. But IE will outscale, so it is worth transitioning if you have the economy to do so. Or if you haven't bought Guinsoo's, then you should just if you're close to that point, you should just go Infinity Edge. But even before you do that, I think that by that point, Lord Dominick's Regards also just out damages Infinity Edge. If you're getting to the point where you're wondering what does more damage, by that point, LDR probably has outskilled or skilled enough to the point where it does more damage than Infinity Edge. If you have enough AD for that transition to be possible, you probably also have enough damage for the pen of LDR to be more valuable. So instead of transitioning straight to Infinity Edge, make sure you at least have LDR first. So it comes to the point where a lot of the time, Infinity Edge actually isn't worth it at all. If you don't have space in your build, if you need certain utility items, which I'll talk about, you can just avoid going IE and you'll be perfectly fine. Other options, like if you need to be a little flexible with your build, like there are things you can do. Deadman's Plate is actually a pretty good item. It doesn't offer a lot of damage besides like its proc, but like it gives you move speed, it gives you health, it gives you armor. Those are all very nice stats. So if you're playing against AD and you need survivability, you need better chase, better catch, that's a good item to go. Other armor options aren't as good, which is why I'm pushing Deadman's to be your best in slot armor item. You can go Frozen Heart, Randuin's if it's really needed, but those don't particularly synergize with Senna. It's just better survivability. The MR options are a little bit better, I would say, because like there are actually some pretty good items. Wit's End is a very strong damage item that happens to give MR. The breakpoint I'd say is like level 12, 13. At that point, it's an equivalent. It's the equivalent to a normal damage item. It compares to IE, LDR, Guinsoo's, Kraken Slayer, Duskblade, Eclipse. Like it comes close in damage to those items. And then it'll obviously scale a little bit more. So like if you need MR, Wit's End is a very good item, but I wouldn't buy it before like third, fourth item, like around like level 13. If you're going to build into it, I would just sit on a Null Magic Mantle for most of the game, and then upgrade it like once you're at the point where you like have you're at your third or fourth item. Maw is also, I mean, it's a decent option. It's not the best in terms of damage, but it does add to your damage and it gives you a shield, which is very nice. QSS, the two QSS items, I prefer Scimitar because even though it doesn't give the health and the crit will become redundant, the active gives you move speed, which is very important for being able to escape if you're getting CC'd, to avoid any of the chaining and stuff. Black Cleaver is a decent item. It's not as strong as it was since the bug where you don't get the double stacks anymore. Even with that bug still around, it's still a decent item. If your team has a lot of AD, it could be worth getting. Titanic is a decent item, at least for on-hit builds. It gives you a little bit of AoE, a little bit of wave clear. Not that you necessarily need that. It gives you 500 health, which is nice, and then the AD is like decent. It gets to be around like 50, which isn't bad, but like you can treat it as like a tank item with like a little bit of, or you can treat it like, I mean, it's its own thing. It's AoE, and it also can proc stuff like Black Cleaver, which is nice if you pair that with Hurricane. Just Senna gets all the benefits of being a crit marksman without having to build crit. So you can only worry about like the utility that items give, or like the percentages. So like Infinity Edge has a percentage modifier, so like it is worth it. Lord Dominick's Regards has a percentage modifier, so it's worth it, both in the armor pen and its like cut down passive. Hurricane just does like 40% of your AD plus the on hit to 2 targets, which is a percentage of your scaling AD. all these things are like what you want to be looking for late game when you're if you're on your full build and like want to truly become the build as optimally as possible. Serpent's Fang is good. It felt pretty bad when it initially got hit and when anti-heal was strong, but then anti-heal's also bad. So now Serpent's Fang is decent. There is an option to go Serpent's Fang and like an anti-heal item, and that provides a lot of utility. You can pair it up with like Hurricane and like Black Cleaver and just be a debuffer. You still have decent damage. Not the optimal way to play Senna, but Senna's one of the few champions that can do it without being useless, so it's something to look into. Except for like a first or second item, Ravenous Hydra is just a strictly worse version of Titanic Hydra, at least on Senna. And you wouldn't get it at that point in time, so I really don't feel like it's worth it. Like all the stats it gives are good, but not as good as other stats that other items give. Quickblades is interesting because if you have 100% grit, you can just perma get the reduction. So this is like an alternative to going a haste build. Just autoing does the same thing. So if you're going something like, if you're going haste build with like Duskblade and Muramana, Quickblades could be a good finishing item or a transition item to go into on hit. Unless you're consistently one-shotting enemy champions, I think it's worth just always transitioning into on hit late game. Even if like the game was good to go lethality early on and you committed to that, there's nothing wrong with that. But then, if to seriously like threaten front lines as well as the back lines that you'd already be threatening, transitioning into on hit is usually the best. The main late game build I would say would be Kraken Slayer or Eclipse, based on the situation. Blade of the Ruined King, Runaan's Hurricane, Lord Dominick's Regards, Infinity Edge, and then whatever other item you need. I mean, you would swap out based on what I said earlier with if you need MR, if you need armor, if you need some kind of utility for your team, you would swap out in the order of priority. So, i.e. first. Oh, and then I'd say if you're full build, you can swap out Blade of the Ruined King, but like only after your full build is it worth swapping out. Blade will always be Senna's best damage item until the point where everyone's full build and you have like an absurd amount of souls, just because of how scaling works. It is a decent item going when going lethality. Like it obviously adds to the burst, but I mean it doesn't compete with crit or on hit in any kind of extended trade. The main benefit would be the active that it gives you. It's a good boots replacement item. Serylda's is interesting because it doesn't ever really outperform LDR, but in a theoretical scenario where you have like an absurd amount of souls, it could be a world where the slow and the haste outvalues the percentage health cut down from LDR. Because if you have to commit to having a defensive item, you might not have the passive anymore. At which point, like, you might as well just take free haste and a slow on on your W before the roots, I guess that has energy, and then on your ult. Shieldbow and Gale Force do similar damage throughout, but I mean they have their respective like niches. Shieldbow has its shield and Gale Force has its active. It'll always do less damage than, or early on it does the same damage as Eclipse. It'll always do less damage than Duskblade and Kraken Slayer. But I mean, the trade-off is utility. So if it's needed, it can be considered. Collector feels kind of bad to build because a lot of the like, unless you have something like Hurricane, which in a lethality build you wouldn't. Collector doesn't really have an advantage over LDR. Early on, there are better damage items for Senna, and then later on, I mean, it's just a scaling thing. So you're never gonna benefit from its passive, and then the stats just don't really compete. Phantom Dancer is weird. Cause like you have to auto 4 times, which I mean, if you're in a on-hit build, you're gonna do anyways. Uh, it also enables like movement speed builds, with kiting. I tried it. It felt okay. I still feel like if you're going to commit to that playstyle, you're better off just going Ghost to your summoner, which doesn't work on support Senna, but like on it where you're the carry. So in fasting or AD Senna, Ghost is actually, I think, a better version of this. What Phantom Dancing does, it doesn't do enough. I feel like the base stats are good, the passive feels okay, but there are other things that can do it better. Like the value of RFC and Hurricane, I think, just always outweigh that of Phantom Dancer. Muramana is a good damage item throughout, but it falls off later on, over IE and LDR. Aspen Sheriff is okay. It's never great, but it's not terrible because it has the bonus AD ratios. If it didn't have that, it would be just as bad as the other Spellblade items. Bloodthirster is okay, but all the stats become redundant because those are literally all the stats Senna get from her passive. So I mean, if you were to get it, you would get it early on, but it feels like kind of a waste. Axiom Arc is alright in a lethality build. I mean, it probably won't allow you to ult multiple times in a fight. So like but like early on, having it for multiple different fights, because Senna's ult is on a long cooldown, so you might not have it for certain fights, and this would change that. Death Stance is somewhat of an alternative to Deadman's Plate, but like it doesn't do that much because you only get the 10% mitigation. The heal is alright because you have your scaling AD, but a lot of the time, like, it's not gonna be used. So I would usually prefer Deadman's over it, though you're sacrificing a lot less damage. Edgemite is fine, but it obviously doesn't compare to a lot of the other items in terms of damage. If you're going lethality, it's okay at best. GA is in a similar boat to Edge of Night. Uh, like, it's okay at best. A lot of the time, if it gets procced, you are likely gonna die anyway unless your team is still alive. Stoneplate's actually decent if you have like enough help items. If you're going stuff like Black Cleaver, Titanic, Deadman's, like you have a nice shield. You don't even need that many. You only need like maybe 1 or 2 health items, and then this gives you other stats that you don't have. So if you're even with just a Black Cleaver or Titanic, it's like you have a decent shield, and then you have the armor and MR that you lack, so you can actually be pretty tanky. If you're gonna slot in one tank item, like one pure tank item, this is a pretty good option. Stormware just doesn't really do enough of anything. I feel like, unless you want to get that like YouTube one-shot build, it has its proc damage, but like, I don't think it's worth. I think the item is just too weak to function. If Senna didn't have her slow, then it would be pretty good, but she can get it for free with her Q, which isn't hard to do, so it's probably not worth buying Stormrazor. Wardstone is a decent item on support. I mean, it's cheap and it counts as a legendary item for Mythic's reasonings. It doesn't provide enough, I would say, but like if you once you have full build, it's not worth keeping. But like before then, you can. There's no reason not to. If you have the gold and you don't have like anything else that you're close to getting, like if you're sitting on the 1100 gold, then it's all right. Support item itself, if you had bought it at any point in the game, is interesting because I mean the stats are like okay. The mana is good early on, but like later on, if you have a decent mana pool, like it's not that important. But you can sell it and then buy it again. So you have your item upgraded, you still have it. So you, an option would be to use the wards, then go to base, sell it, get it an actual item for a fight. Uh, it's a little like risky, in the sense that like, oh, if the enemy team pushes through and clears your vision while you're backing, then you don't have wards. Dark is just a broken power spike. Like it's really gold efficient, and then lethality is like extra special on Senna. So like, even if you're not committing to a lethality build, having a Dirk is never bad. And like it's very easy to just go Umbral Glaive into whatever build you're going. So if you don't have a specific goal, like you should just be going Dirk into Umbral Glaive and then figure it out from there. Hopefully by like 10 minutes into the game you'll know what you're building. Rage Life is all right. Like it does decent damage, but like it only builds into one thing. So I mean, if you're going to build Guinsoo's, because like Guinsoo's doesn't really beat something like Bork, so Rage Knife isn't that necessary anymore. But if you're gonna go like Kraken, Bork, Guinsoo's, then getting this early is fine. Okay, so I made a tier list. It's pretty quickly put together. This isn't ordered within the tiers, this is just like generally where I think they should go. The way you want to look at how good a champion is with Senna is there's two angles. It's how well Senna benefits her partner and how well the partner benefits Senna. So the better pairings are the ones where there's a lot of mutual benefit, or both champions want to do similar things. Some stuff might be a little weird, but like Mundo's a weird one, for instance, because people are like, what does this lane do? But like, and like originally I didn't have him that high, but like I played it a little bit after I saw a video on Mundo Bot. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this can work. And then I tried it with Senna, and like Senna helps Mundo, and Mundo can do his thing alone. Having the poke helps a lot, and then Mundo is strong during the part of the game where Senna's weak, and then Senna's strong in the part of the game where Mundo's weak, so it actually works out. This is my S tier. This is my A tier. This is my B tier. Oh. This is my C tier. And then the D tier is champions that just don't really function in the bot lane at all. This list I don't think has Bel'Veth, which is probably pretty bad. Probably C or D. And then I think Nudier. Yeah, Nudier I'm not too sure about. It'd be around the same spot, I would say. So yeah. If you guys like this video, have any comments, concerns, any criticism. I mean, I'm quite new to this, so feedback would be very nice, and then hopefully my future videos will be better in quality. Thank you everyone for watching.